In this video, we're going to start out by just defining arrays, and we'll do an example of defining an object, but we're actually going to stick with using arrays in our ultimate application. I want to show you this in this two-step process because this is another piece of that understanding how to code, how to build a program. So since arrays are new to us, we're going to just explore those first, make sure we understand conceptually and practically how to code them, how to write values in, how to read values out, test a theory we have about removing a value from an array because that's going to be key to our application. And we're just going to do that in a standalone file because integrating it in our larger program right away would be really hard to debug if things go wrong, because that one's got so many other pieces. And as we know, when we do something new, sometimes it breaks something old. So we don't want to end up in a situation where we create too many different places for things to go wrong and we can't effectively debug. So we're going to just take this part of defining and using our arrays out as a standalone coding issue for a moment. For this video, we're going to work that through. And then once we feel confident that we understand how those arrays are going to work and that we have the functionality that we need, then we'll go apply this in our larger program. So that's a technique that you can use as you continue building your larger program for the end of the semester. Just isolate out little pieces and make sure you understand them thoroughly, and then you can apply them in your other program. Okay, let's go take a look at some coding. So as you can see, I've just opened a new HTML file, just very basic. I've got my script section here. We'll just use this to test out our theories and learn these new features. Now, as I said, we're actually going to use arrays in our program, but let's just test out an object first, just so you can see what that's like and how to code it. So objects are really tricky because they use some different coding conventions than you see in lots of other places in JavaScript. So say that card is going to be our object, and we're going to set that equal to this set of properties, and the properties will have some different values. And remember, we talked about this. If we're trying to make it like a real card, it would be suit, and that would have string value. It could have a string value. We could use numeric values that would correlate to the suits. Either one is okay. And then we're going to have a card value. And we could decide here whether we want to do this as a string so that we can get the face cards in there with their symbols, or whether we're going to just allow our algorithm to, convert those face cards to symbols and back again, and just use the numbers. I'll just go ahead and use numeric values in here just for the sake of expediency. But then we could conceivably make a deck of these cards that identify each of the cards in this way. And just to show you how we would access these different values, notice how you use the name of the overall variable dot property, and then the value of that property would be put into the place here. Sorry, one little syntax thing, because you actually separate your object properties with commas. So I need a comma between those two. I do not need a comma at the end with the last one. Now this should work. There we go. And so you can see that, in fact, it is reporting out those values that we would expect. Like I said, this would essentially be like a multi-dimensional array, and using the word labels can be a little bit tricky depending on what you're doing in terms of initializing. And since we do need to initialize these in batches, we're going to go ahead and use an array, and we're going to use actually 4 different arrays. But right here, we're only going to test out just one. We're fine to just test out one array, and then we can apply that knowledge with all 4 when we actually get into our program. So let's just use hearts as our example, and we're going to create a new array this way. So notice I'm just using that square bracket, an empty square bracket, to say, hey, this is going to be an array. I could explicitly initialize it with values if I wanted to right here, but I want to test out using a for loop to initialize the values, because we're going to need to do that in the program, so it wouldn't hurt to learn how to do that here. So we want to think this through. So we want 2 through ace, where ace is 14. So that's 13 values. So we want this I to be less than or equal to 13, and then we're going to increment I. Now, like I said, remember, computers start counting at 0. We're starting to count at 2, so we're going to need to offset that a little bit to get our values in there correctly. But let's just go ahead and do it like this to see where we're starting out. and then we'll work from there and make our tweaks. That's the purpose of this, is to help us make some tweaks. So now here's going to be the cool part. We're going to take hearts, and I'm going to say I want heart I, so the first time that would be 0, equal to, let's just for the moment say I, and I know we're going to need to adjust that just so you can see how this is going to work. And then let me report that out so you'll see. And I want you to see also what happens when I just report out a full array. So this little square bracket with a value in it, that's called the index of the array. There are an infinite number of little buckets you can have in each array. We're just initializing the first 13 of them with 0 through 13. So I want you to see how that works. So this will access an individual member. And see what happens. So now we have 0, 1, 2, 3, all of our values all the way up to 13. Now, obviously 0 and 1, these are not valid values that we want. So we need to tweak that a little bit, because we want the actual values to be the values that we could display out to the user, even though the indexes will be slightly different. So if we said I plus 2, does that take care of our problem? Kind of, except now we have a 15. So that tells me we need one more little tweak, and that's basically to just get out that less than or equal to and just do the less than. Okay, there we go. That's what we want. We want our array to contain numbers 2 through 14, and then we know we already have functions in our program that can convert the 11, 12, 13, 14 into the various face card values that we need. Now, the other thing I want to test out is, how do I remove a value from an array, especially a value from the middle of an array? Well, we're going to use a method called splice to remove a value. So we're going to use the method splice, not slice, but splice. And what it takes as its, so, oh, actually, let's do that. Okay, so what splice takes as its parameters is the index location of the place where you want to start cutting, and then the length of how many elements from the array you want to cut out. So let's just say randomly, we'll say 8, and we want to cut out 1. We only ever want to cut out 1 for this particular application, but you could cut out 1. Now let's go ahead and check out what hearts is going to look like before and after. So we'll just do one alert for each one. Okay. So right here, right, that's what we expect. That's what we had before. Now let's see after our splice. Check it out. It has reduced the length by 1, and right here, let's see, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 is missing. 10 would be the 8th location, the 8th index location in our array. Notice the other thing that happened there, the length of the array has been reduced by 1. And let's just demonstrate that theory of how we can check on and report out the length. And this is exactly like we would do if it were a string. Use that length property, and we have used that before. So now you can see the length is 13 here in our array originally. Now the length is down to 12, and so it will reduce. And then when that length value hits 0, then we can say, yep, that's all used up. We've illustrated our principles pretty well for what we want to use. We've tested this out. We know how to get something out of there. We know how to initialize the array pretty easily. So now I think we're ready to go integrate this into our larger program, which we will do in the next video.